Welcome back to the SEO Leverage podcast. This is episode 139. Today we are going to talk all about operations, the operations chaos, founders being not necessarily the most effective piece of the puzzle to grow a business, I guess. But we're going to hear a lot more about this from my guest today, Lloyd Thompson from Virtual Do. Welcome, Lloyd.
Good to have myself here, Gert. Good to be here. Wow, that came out a bit funny. Yeah, really good to be here, Gert. I mean, I know you and I talk quite a bit, but it's good to actually be on your podcast. Obviously got quite a lot to say about this, so very happy to share what I've learned along the way.
I'm very much looking forward to this as well. We had to learn a lot of these things by like the hard way because I didn't know you yet when we built this business. I think we've come a long way. We're going to talk about it, how we have set it up. I'm looking forward to get your input as well. But first of all, can you give us a brief idea of where you come from, what Virtual Do is all about, what you're doing for businesses these days, so we have a little bit of idea who is speaking?
Yeah, great. Yeah, so hi, my name's Lloyd, and my business is Virtual DOO, and we help busy business owners, typically with teams of 5 to 25 staff, get out of the day-to-day operations. And we do that by giving the founder or owner access to a general manager or a COO on a flexible month-to-month basis. So that gives that owner the opportunity to work on their passions, relationship strategy, or even just shake the tree for new business. And so this has been an evolving piece. You hear about fractional quite a bit. There's lots of different types of fractional business, fractional CMOs and fractional CFOs. Fractional meaning getting access to someone who is an expert who's not full-time for you. They might be across a number of businesses, typically on a retainer. So that's really common. So obviously it's lower cost than if you were to have a full-timer, but you're getting access to a professional on a fractional flexible basis. And then in our case, we do this for operations. So you're getting access to a experienced operations expert on a month-to-month basis.
Sounds really, really good. We have a lot of smaller clients and smaller companies listening to this who might not be exactly familiar maybe with the exact terminology. How would you describe what does an operations manager do? Yeah,
so I look at it as the one person who sits between the founder and the team. Mm-hmm. Use the term operations manager. I keep this title pretty loose in terms of in the business. Like we are, for that kind of size team of 5 to 25, there could be a number of different titles. It could be COO, but it may not be applicable for that team. It might be general manager. It might be head of operations. It might be chief of staff. So in our role, we are that one person between the founder and the team who's providing like a bit of a suspension as a buffer so that owner isn't overwhelmed with all the things coming their way, and that person can help execute in all the initiatives. So just give you a flavour of the people that are coming to us and working with us. They are generally either moving away from pain or wanting to get closer towards their vision, and they are typically time poor business owners who are doing all of the things, delegating, being the primary problem solver in their business. There might be operational chaos, that's the other element. So there might be, and that relates almost to time as well. They might be working very long hours, but they might have a very good operation in the front end, and I can think of many businesses I've worked with like this. They have a fantastic product, but in the back end, how the delivery is going is not so systemized. It's a little bit chaotic. And in the more sunny day scenarios, it can be people who are preparing to exit their business, and you can't exit your business if your product is you. Like if it's you just driving everything. So part of us coming in is to how to get those folks out. And then finally, it's if people have a business that's doing well and they're selling product, but they're struggling to grow. And so that's where I guess the three sort of areas that we're looking at are about how to get that founder back time by how best to take things off that person, how to bring about operational smoothness, and then how to grow the business.
It sounds like a huge challenge, right? I have in the back of my mind how we operate, and like I said, I think we've come a long way. But I think back a few years before we named our head of operations, and I imagine somebody coming in. How long does it take you to get a hold of what is actually going on?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, we normally start with, it's an operational health assessment. I use that more than the term audit, because people think, oh no, it's an audit. It's a kind of negative connotation. And the reason for coming in and doing that is because if you just start, sometimes you don't see the wood through the trees. Sometimes you just start, and whatever challenges people are dealing with, you'll just start working with them on those challenges, and you might not find that you're working on the thing that's going to give you the best bang for buck. Mm-hmm. So it does take time. But for the operational health assessment, we dedicate 1 month to this. So it's a proper look into the business. And I might talk a bit about this, if that's all right, because this is really the heart of diagnosing what's going on and what we would do about it. So we split that into 4 areas. And the first area is going to be about vision, values, and accountability. And so the reason we start there, I think when people hear vision and values, they think, oh, this is fluffy stuff, really, do I need to do this? The reason we start with this is because it's important to know the vision, because if you don't know where you're going, you're going to likely end up someplace else. And I can think of it was actually an SEO agency we worked with a couple of years ago, and the owner had a very clear vision. The only problem was it was in his head, and the team did not know about this vision. Right. And his vision, when he explained it to us, this was about having a white glove service, very high touch with the client, super hands-on. But actually what the team were implementing was more high throughput, just going for a lower cost point. And so how could the team possibly know that what was in his head? So the reason I start there is because I used to do the classic vision statement and mission statement, but these days what I've been doing over probably the last year and a half is doing an activity called Vivid Vision. And this is a great creative piece of work where you will paint a picture of what it feels like to walk through your business in, say, 1 to 3 years' time. Like, what's the customer service like? What are the people in your team? How do they feel? What are the values? So this one artifact, you can describe your customer interactions, your quality of service, the values in your business. You can also talk about like what your goals are, like what you want it to be, why you started this business. And this is a great alignment document so that you can share with your team and see if it resonates with them. You can actually even share it with your customers, and I've got this on my website. Mm-hmm. And the reason for doing this is alignment so that you can align your team and also attract the customers to work with you. It's also a great sort of one and done artifact where you can put your company values in there. And the reason I start here on values when I'm talking about operations is because this is the baseline for how you hire people, and how you retain people, and how you decide whether someone's the right fit in your tribe of your business, is to have values which defines the culture of your business. So that's where we normally start. We want to know, have they got a vision? Have they got values? Because that's the core of hiring, firing, retention, performance management, attracting and repelling people. So it's like the sturdy base. And related to that, the next piece we do is look at accountability. And quite often the reason why the founder is getting stuck with things is because there isn't clear accountability in the business of who owns what. And so when it comes to a piece of work getting done, it might be one case where the ball just gets dropped because no one owns it, or there could even be a double up because it's not clear who really owns that. And so working with a business and mapping out who is accountable for what is a really good early stage thing to do. And if I think about that SEO business that we worked with a couple of years ago, once they had the vision in place and the values in place, they knew sort of who belonged in their tribe of their business long term. And then when we mapped out the accountabilities, we found quite a few gaps. And we also found where somebody was doing too much. There was a guy who was running the operations of the business there, and he was also trying to do delivery. I mean, it's just not going to scale. Can you imagine switching between managing a team and doing all of the work? It's pretty hard to do. And he's not the founder.
I was going to say a founder might be still used to it a little bit. The operations manager at some point should get out of it, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's definitely an interesting one. I think accountability was a big one for us as well, because it just showed us who is going to be with us when things get a little bit tighter, and who is just raising the hand and say, hey, look, I have this thing in my hand. I don't know how to proceed. And who would, like you said, drop the ball. They just ignore this task and say, I don't care, I'm not the owner, but I also don't care about the outcome. And those tasks would just get lost.
You know, a really simple exercise that I encourage people to do is, if you do have SOPs in your business, and I know you will, Gert, but a lot of people just get to that later, if at all. If you do have SOPs, operational procedures in your business, then just having an index page of all of your SOPs and a one name against each SOP of who is accountable for that SOP is incredibly powerful, because quite often SOPs don't get owned and maintained and updated because it's just seen as a team function. So I say accountable because you can have many people responsible for the doing, but what you want is just one person who is accountable, and you say, look, this is your baby, it's your job to keep this thing updated, maintained. When you go on leave, I want you to make sure that this thing gets run by someone else, and it's your job to train it. So if you have all of the processes in your business and clear accountability, it creates that sense of ownership, and that's really important.
Awesome. So if we've got vision, values, accountability, what else do we have in the 4
Yeah, so the next one is time. So one of the early activities we're going to do after we've done that is look at what the business owner is doing and work out how can we take that off that person. So how do we do that? So what we do is we have them complete a task audit, and this is a really simple activity, and the more complicated you make this, the less likely you're going to get a business owner to complete this. And it can be as simple as open a Google Sheet, leave this Google Sheet open for a couple of weeks, and every time a new type of task comes up, just add it to that list. That might be the only thing you do. If you want to do more, you can clock against that row. Each row you can add how much time you're spending on it, and you can add another level to it and highlight it in green or red, whether it gives you more energy or less energy. And you might also add another column which is if you were to rate it between 1 and 3, where 1 is this is a low cost activity and I could outsource this to a low cost location, and 3 is this is expensive, you can add that. So, but the headlines are, you want a list of tasks. And so what that allows us to do is work with the founder, have a look at these activities and work out, right, well, what can we take off your plate? How do we do that? Are we gonna automate it? Are we gonna delegate it with the team? Is it something that we can own? Is it something that there's a hiring gap for, or a gap of accountability? So that allows us to just take that off, a number of things off that founder, such that in the end they're just left with the things that give them energy, or the things that they feel like they really need to do. And if I think about this with a customer that we work with, who really benefited a huge amount from this. He was is a education seller, and so he would do big stage events, he does webinars, and it's a very high energy activity. And then when he gets back from doing all of that, he's then back working with his team, and he finds that very emotionally exhausting, and working out the issues with the team, that's quite a challenge. And so just having a one person who sits between him and the team and works out how that's going to be handed off and how that's going to be run with the team has been a huge enabler for him, because that's meant that he no longer has to worry about a lot of the team issues. That's just handled by one person. And in this case, we observed that we were seeing his team leads in his business were paying themselves overtime but not delegating the work. And that's just something he wouldn't have seen because he didn't have the bandwidth to do that. And so just having us come in there, be a person between him and the team, meant that he got more time, but also meant that he got more. His feedback to us was, I feel like I've got return on emotion rather than just a return on investment, because I feel like I've got energy back, doing the stuff. So the time audit is a really simple exercise you can do for yourself. Sometimes it's not obvious where you're spending all of your time. So that's one activity I'd really recommend.
Awesome. I definitely can relate to this. One question came up for me right now is when you come into a company, obviously there's a company culture, there is a certain hierarchy, certain people are like the go-to people when something goes wrong before they go to the founder probably, right? And then you come in as an external person, maybe with little idea about the industry, little idea about the niche. How easy is, or how do you facilitate this entering an unknown space where you just need to earn the respect you probably need to do your job?
That's a great question. And that's actually another reason why we start with that operation assessment, because there we're not coming in and doing stuff straight away. It's more observational. So we come in, we interview the team, we find out what their pain is, we work out what's working well, we look at their team, system setup. And every week, through all of these conversations, we play back to the founder all of the things we're seeing and where we're starting to see the opportunities. And then at the end, that's where we come back with a list of things and say, okay, this is the list of opportunities prioritized by effort and impact. However, on the way through doing that, we have been talking with the team and asking them about their challenges. So we're listening to them, like what's going on for them. Forget all of the extra things that we're seeing. What are the challenges that they're seeing? And so these things can make it into the priority list. It's also an opportunity for us to see if we're going to work well with them. So it's kind of like this first month is almost like an audition for us. And it's also an opportunity for us to see, well, are we going to like working with this team? Are they going to like working with us? And from the very beginning, we make it very clear and we frame it such that we're there ultimately to make ourselves redundant. We come in, we do this assessment, we build the list of opportunities. At the end of that, they decide they can either fix it themselves or they have us remediate until on a month-to-month basis until it's done. So we have a message which we share with the team, like, hey, put your weapons down. We're here to help you and enable you and fix these frustrations that have been happening for you. You might not have had the bandwidth to do. And our objective is to enable you and make your team more autonomous. It's not here to replace you, but we are looking for opportunities for improvement working with you. So that's how we go about getting people on side. I've certainly experienced different culture. Like early in my business, I did make mistakes in this space where when I was in corporate world, I was always hiring for me. I was always hiring my team member who's going to be in my tribe. And so I knew what I was looking for. And now there's this kind of extra element where I've got to take from our team and find the person who's going to be the right match for their culture. And early on in my business, I made a mistake. I put into a business where I would say their culture was that of incredibly direct and of little analysis, and that was fine. They would prefer to just make a quick decision, make a mistake, very, very fail fast, rather than burn any time on analysis. And what I had given them is someone who was much more consultative, wanted to come up with all the options, and he ended up being a fantastic person for another business where they were completely the opposite to the first one, right, and really wanted that kind of considered, get everybody on board with the decision, is everyone okay, decision by community almost. Right.
And I think this is a really good way, actually. I can imagine how this works out if they come in as a consultant pretty much trying to help, and definitely if people can see their ideas also reflected in the final priority list, this makes a lot of sense. Yeah, awesome. Awesome. So that's the time part.
That's the time part. So then the third part we look at is operational smoothness, and I break that down into 3 areas: rhythms, dashboards, and feedback loops. And so if I give this an example, in fact, I'm going to go straight to that e-commerce client I talked about, who was quite direct and structured with his team. He was there doing 16-hour days, working, really, really hard, and selling a fantastic product, a global e-commerce business, also featuring later now in retail. But it felt like the emergency department in his team. There was no particular rhythm that ran something. It was like quite often he's got a new decision he wants to make. He's just going to pull the whole team in, like 30 odd people, into a meeting periodically. So there's people there who don't belong there. So the rhythms of the business were a bit unclear and a bit ad hoc and not very structured, which meant that everyone was always running on adrenaline, and there's just people in meetings that don't need to be in meetings, and it's not clear who owns what. So coming into a business like that, we had a look at what the rhythms are that need to run the business. And so in his case, it's like they need a team meeting where they're actually going to measure the reds and greens of the business. Like, what are the numbers that really matter for an e-commerce? And they only need the leaders of the various teams to be in that meeting. And if there's a red, then that's an opportunity to find who needs to be pulled away into a meeting to solve that red. So next time we talk about it a week later, it's green. So there's a classic set of rhythms that we can find, and it's normally like your COO and your founder meeting, a team meeting where you look at reds and greens, feedback loop meetings, and I'll just touch on that a bit more in a minute, one-on-ones and daily huddles. Like, these are the 5 things that need to be had but not overcooked and done operationally smooth. And so for this business, it was like they really needed basic planning practices. Like, they should plan out for the next, okay, what's the design team going to do, the dev team, video team for the next 10 days. It's all working together towards a campaign. So that's one kind of rhythm. And then another thing is, when they're running their actual campaigns, like they've got Father's Day, Mother's Day, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all of these things that they're going to promote, there needs to be a feedback loop such that when this event runs, is there some kind of model of what an event looks like, some kind of a template? So when we look at how that event worked, what worked well, what could have been improved, and then that we upgrade or update the model so that every time we do a campaign that gets better. And so this is a really commonly missed part of the process. People just carry on and just do their role. They just do the job, and they don't think let's have a feedback. And it doesn't always have to be something negative. It's quite often it's like, wow, this campaign went really well. Why did this campaign go so well? What is it? So, and that gives you an opportunity to constantly improve, whether it's an improvement from an opportunity or to do more of something that works. So that's how we bring about rhythms, dashboards, operational smoothness, by doing rhythms, dashboard, and feedback loops. And in this case, it allowed for the founder to get out of just doing all those things by scattergunning the team with tasks every single day, because he had us helping with basically project management, operational smoothness, those 3 things. So he could focus on, well, I'd like to tell you that he didn't end up doing 16-hour days. It's actually not true. He ended up just spending his hard-earned hours doing the stuff he liked instead, which for him is video creative. He just should put himself into those things instead. But that's his passion. He's still going to find himself doing those long hours and working on his passions instead. So that's the 3rd thing, operational smoothness.
Wow, that's amazing. I think what we did for feedback loops, I think this might be going in a similar direction. We definitely have our SOPs and have been working on them for quite a few years, but we would actually go back to them all the time. So I would go off of a client meeting after delivering an audit, and the client would give me some feedback that I didn't understand this. What about that? Can you look into this a little bit more, etc. And we would go back to the SOP then and refine it and say, let's make sure the next time we take this into account, because this might be valid for other clients as well. So just we talk about this in a context of product improvement. Let's put it this way. Now, feedback loop is a great term for it. we would just say, yeah, let's just try to make our products better and better. And the product can be a delivery of a consulting recommendation or a strategy, or this can be an audit we do, or this can be like a particular process we just execute on a regular basis.
And like you said, I mean, it doesn't have to be just an SOP. It can be anything, and it'd be surprised how many businesses don't have that process of feeding back at the end of doing something, and that's really just the beginning of making constant improvement. And these kind of meetings should feature every week.
Awesome. Yeah, before I quickly share how operations work in our end, we definitely want to know the fourth one.
So the fourth one is more about we've probably in about the last year and a half started expanding into another area called revenue ops, and that's because we hired one person who already had this feather in his cap. And so this is about how the people and the processes and the tools and the data can all hang together, working with your customer data in your CRM, so that you're maximizing the opportunities that come out of your CRM. Like, you've paid so much to acquire a lead or a prospect or a customer. How can you maximize the most out of that data that you've got there? And there's a number of ways you can do this, but I'll just give you a quick example. We worked with a coaching business with a team of coaches, like think a mini Tony Robbins. And what we found with them is that they had a marketing team, and their marketing team warms up these prospects, and they eventually get them on a call, or they start an email conversation. At that point, it gets handed over to sales, and then sales will try and get that conversation happening to be, try and close it. Yeah. And what happened here is that if sales didn't close the lead, this lead just disappeared off a cliff. Like, that was the end of the story. Like, there was no more. And that was because sales and marketing are just operating in silos. Like, they just have no, apart from one connection, which is the booked meeting or a conversation starting. So a simple thing there is connecting those processes and how they work in the CRM. Like, after 60 days, in this case, a simple fix to this is after 60 days, if sales haven't closed the lead, it just gets flipped back to marketing, so that marketing have the opportunity to re-warm that up. And there's so much you can do in your CRM. In terms of what you were talking about earlier, is about the feedback loop and making the product better. You've got all of this data that you can be storing there. If someone buys from you, why did they buy from you? Was it an upsell or cross-sell from an existing product? If they didn't buy from you, what was the reason? If they left you, why did they leave? Is it because they got to a certain size of business where they no longer think it makes sense to involve an agency? Or, dare I say, could it have been bad performance? If so, oh my gosh, you really want to fix that immediately, and then what needs to change. So there is so much you can do with your CRM to make sure that you're maximizing the opportunities of all of those people that you've been working with and all those leads that have been coming your way.
It's so important that this goes actually back somewhere. I remember we were working with a client from Austria, an e-commerce client. I was actually doing programming back then for them, and they were like all excited about their new IT solution that would tell them exactly, because they had like a physical store, and it would tell them exactly on which hook which product needs to hang in order to maximize sales, etc. And it would also tell them which products don't sell, so they should remove them from the store. What it didn't tell them is what happens with the stock afterwards, right? It would just say, take this out of the store, put it back into the storage. But it wouldn't tell them, look, you now have 10,000 products in the storage with a value of, 50,000 euros. And there's no next step, right? There was no definition of a process where it's like, okay, now go to this person, which is going to try to sell it on eBay or wherever
Can you imagine how much that cost?
Exactly. It was huge, because they paid hundreds of thousands of euros for the IT solution. So proud to be having an optimized store, just to end up with thousands of dead storage, pretty much is probably a better term for that. Yeah. But there was this next step wasn't defined, right? It was really reminded now where they say, okay, the lead doesn't close, but now what do we do with this lead, right? What actually happens what's the next step in order to make sure that the circle closes, or maybe it comes back at some point when this is when the time is right.
And it's so important to track sort of data of why they bought for things like that as well, because sometimes when you introduce a new product, I'm talking about now physical product, if you introduce a physical product, you've got to make sure that, like, how you've got a load of aging stock in the back there. You, on the one hand, you want to sell it. On the other hand, it's like, if you introduce a new offer, a new product, are you gonna cannibalize that old product? Like, is that gonna now die because of this new thing? So having data about what they bought and what they didn't buy is really important for that. So much you can do in the system there.
That's definitely fascinating. I do remember our own journeys. I started when we started the brand SEO Leverage. I already had like an agency many years before, and then we created SEO Leverage, and I started hiring the first team members. And I remember my business mentor James, which we both know, James Remco, very quickly suggested to hire the first manager, which was felt a little bit early for me. But within a week was a game changer, and we only had like 3 people, right? There were only 3 people in the team, and I said, why would I hire a manager as the 4th person? We could actually hire another consultant, another SEO, a link builder, whatever. And he was like, no, go for a manager, right? And this was already like a wake up moment for me. Where I said, hey, maybe a hierarchy isn't that bad after all, because I'm thinking of my little group, and I'm leading this group, and we all equal, and like theories or dreams like those. This was an interesting one, right? And then the team grew. We had hired more strategists, as they are called pretty much here, that run the projects and run the teams and the processes, etc. And at some point, we still use Slack today, but my Slack looked like a Christmas tree. Right? So I'm still doing all of the calls, all client calls, all strategy goes through me, which I like. I get energy from that. I get energy from client calls. I get energy from finding solutions to tricky SEO problems. And now with platform leverage, obviously the challenges are also bigger with AI, etc. But at some point I said, hey, we need to change something. And I had this team member, Christina, who had been with me for years. And she was pretty much my right hand already. And I said, look, I want you to run this, right? But it was like, and I did a few attempts and said, no, ask Christina. And I had a moment where I had to kind of officially say, guys, there is going to be a layer between us now.
Yeah.
If Christina decides something, it's the same as if I decided. Whether this is good or not, in my opinion, afterwards doesn't matter. But first step to Christina. Christina and I are going to chat on a regular basis and are going to figure things out, but it's not going to go through me. So I think I had to kind of empower her officially in a call, say, look, moving forward, this is what's going to happen, because you guys know you wait for my response sometimes 2 days, which doesn't make sense. Whatever you have first goes to Christina, and Christina is going to come to me.
That's brilliant.
And I had pretty much, but it was like, it happened a little bit by accident. I thought it probably made sense to do this, but it was a little bit by accident. But in hindsight, it was like an important moment where the team realized, hey, okay, we are actually bigger now. Some started with me, where we pretty much talking every day about every single thing. But it just saw, hey, we actually have a process now, we have a structure, we have a hierarchy, and it just made sense. But it was like an official empowerment of this person, and where I said, look, whatever you need, Christina's going to handle this. And
well, that's a really
it comes to me, right?
That's a really good way to do it, because if when you put something in like that, the team then try and go to you to seek a different result, then it's just eroded everything you've built in there. And so I do believe you have an open door business and say anyone can talk to anyone. That's great. You want that. But having people who are clearly accountable for different decisions, so in your case you enable Christina, it's like, hey, you can talk to me, but she's the person that's going to make the decision. This is the call, and that's what you did.
One thing that definitely helped us, I think, what I still do is have a one-on-one call with every team member every couple of months. So this is where they might share things that on a daily basis they don't share, or specifically ask them for frustrations. Or like, is there anything we can take off your plate? With like some weird task, something that's really frustrating, that's really draining their energy, etc. So they might raise a few things, which I might then feed back to operations and say, look, let's look at this process, or let's pick up that one. But I do remember, like, this was like probably 80% of weight off my shoulders. Obviously now it's hers like looking like a Christmas tree, but she's also not 20 hours on calls every week, right? So it's obviously different, and she's definitely unique in a sense that she's very organized and has a really good grip on everything, and has like pretty much the knowledge I have on SEO over the years. She's been working in the same physical office with me for years. So we have a lot of knowledge transfer there. But I think for the team it was just important to say, okay, now they're happy, they were really happy to adapt, which I didn't think was that easy. But it was like really important for them to say, okay, now this person has the power that I thought only this other person had, and now I understand I have to kind of respond in a different way.
And the result of that is you've shown that you can enable and give a career path to someone in your business, and have them work more in their zone of genius. And then for you, that's giving you more time to work on your highest value area. That's really contributing most to your business. So it's a really good way to do things.
I think in this case, yeah, definitely we figured it out somehow, and are definitely still refining it. But I'm really interested in this ref ops you were talking about. I think we have nothing like that. It would be in my head probably the ref ops. This makes sense. Where it's okay, how can we combine my sales efforts with a marketing campaign, or with some data I'm seeing, etc. But this is definitely one aspect we need to completely get into.
I do have. I have literally just finished a workshop on last week, where I put a number of these artifacts together on a PDF. So it's going to go up on my website straight after this call, actually, so people can download and self-assess where they are. So that's going to be at virtualdoo.com/resources. And by the time this is live, people can download, including yourself, Gert, of course, a revenue operations self-assessment sheet, so you can see where the gaps are and where the opportunities might be.
Awesome. Now that's amazing. I have one question before we wrap this up. I think there was a lot of information already, and I already know we're going to ask you to come back in the future episode.
Love to be here.
Continue the conversation a little bit. There's one theme obviously now, not only in the marketing space or SEO space, but in general in business, which is AI. And I can't record a podcast episode these days without touching on this topic. What are you seeing? So you work with a lot of companies, you work with a lot of management, obviously, team. Everybody has this kind of fantasy. Can we leverage the team better? Can the team be smaller? Can we have existing team members do more high value stuff and have the machines work for the low level frustrating stuff? What does the situation look like from your perspective?
It probably won't surprise you to see every business we work with is using it in some way or another. Absolutely. And I think in terms of team members, I mean, the people with skills in AI are going to replace those with skills without AI. If you're not looking at AI now, and you're in any kind of online business in particular, you're going to be in trouble. So we're seeing AI being used across the board. Simple cases that probably won't surprise anyone are around analysis and might be content creation. I mean, for me in my own business, my team member does a lot of my creatives, and he uses AI to come up with images, and he tweaks them and refines them in things like Canva and editing tools, but there's a lot of AI there. Certainly in our meetings, it used to be that we would assign someone the role of the note taker who's then going to hand out the actions at the end, and we will be using Loom for that now. And I would just tweak it to say that make sure you can give Loom a hint and say, this is an action for so-and-so, just to make sure it ends up there, and that note taker, the person in the meeting who's going to be the note taker, will check that the notes are correct. But I've seen these tools like Loom get so much better over time. I think the one that I'm definitely keeping an eye on now, and we've seen one business already make the bold move, is AI agents. So this is going from asking AI for some knowledge or asking it to do something for you as to be more like a thing that just works continuously in your business. It just continues working. And so one of our e-commerce clients is currently looking at and in the process of using AI agents to actually make some efficiency in his team, like reduce the team size and have his AI agents handle more things. So like a first layer of defense can be handled through the AI agent and then only fed back to his team for more complicated items. But what I'm really noticing now is just the quality and the power of AI. Just to give like an example of how I just used it last week, right? I bought a new secondhand Toyota hybrid last week. This thing's just an immensely complicated beast with more buttons than I've ever seen on this thing, and it comes with a 700-page manual. And I just got the PDF of this and I uploaded it into ChatGPT, and I just took photos of things and I said, what does this do? What does that do? And it was brilliant, and it gave me the analysis. It just explained to me what that button does. It was so much quicker. And so I think about customer service, like the power now, the engine behind that is very powerful. But so it's the AI agents, and that's the piece to watch. So what are people doing right now? They're mostly still doing the pretty standard stuff you'd expect. They're using it for analysis. They're using it for creation of content, and that's very powerful. But there are now people starting to dip their toes into AI agents, and I think in the next 6 months, the speed it's going, I'm regularly watching YouTube videos on ChatGPT Operator, that $200 a month plan. Right. I'm going to see more people moving over to that, I'm sure. So
I think it's definitely to watch. I'm looking at Operator as well. The way we are setting it up right now is when we're not looking at shrinking down the team. I think we're at 17 or so now. Mm-hmm. Not looking at growing, definitely not looking at growing. But what I told the team, and we have been talking about AI probably 2 years before ChatGPT came out, and started testing tools, and then it's not yet there, etc. The way we look at it is to integrate them as AI bots in Slack, like Slack bots, and every team member is going to have an assistant, and this is an AI assistant. So the consultant is going to have an assistant, the writer is going to have an assistant, and all those assistants have access to the client information. So if the writer wants something, the assistant is going to know that this particular client wants to go after a certain customer segment. If the consultant types something in, the bot is also going to have the same information. So this is like how we already work manually, where we have like the customer information centralized, and then every team member goes there and look, okay, what did the client last time say on the call? Is this still the goal, or have they changed, or do they want to achieve something in particular, or have a particular focus? And we just want all those assistants essentially have this common access.
That's great, and then
every team member has like in Slack as if it was another team member, right? You have direct messages with this assistant. It's not even shared with others. You have just a DM, send them a DM and get a response. But in the back end, it's essentially a structure of AI agents talking to each other. But this way, this is my best guess so far, right? When we can combine it with Operator, it's going to be a lot of fun. But for now, it's just having this access to the information, or to how do we do things, because this bot has access to our SOPs, and the SOPs are refined or have samples, etc. This starts to work really, really well. So I'm looking to see how other companies actually do it, because we obviously nobody has experience here. Everybody's trying something and figuring out if it works.
And I like that, because what you're doing there is you're also investing in the AI agent learning and growing that particular area. As you say, each person's going to have one that they're responsible for. And I like that, because I think that if we're looking at how people buy back their time, quite often they start with an administrator and then they go and have a person do delivery and then so forth. And I think that you as the business owner, it's great to have automation, but do you want to be running all the automations yourself? Probably not. So if you can have everybody in your team, you don't want to be having your hands maintaining broken automations or broken AI or what it's doing. So if you can assign ownership to each one, I think that's incredibly powerful. One thing that we have started doing in our operations audit, just on the topic of AI, is when we have a look in the business and understand if they just do have, to what extent they've created processes for things like documented processes and how the way of doing things. One thing we've started doing is get a handle on, is this something that's a really clear recipe? Like, is this something where this could be run out of a browser? Because if it is, then in the next few months, this is probably something that ChatGPT operator might handle, and then we can have that team member responsible, as you say, for running that process. So that's where we are right now.
This is such great information, Lloyd. I really appreciate everything you're sharing here. You obviously know how to run businesses from all kinds and run them smoothly. If people want to find out more about you, want to connect with you, what would be the best way?
Yeah, you can just head over onto virtualdoo.com. And once again, if you want some resources, some of the things that we've just talked about there, just head over to virtualdoo.com/resources, and I'll make sure that's available very shortly.
Awesome. We're definitely going to link to it from seoleverage.com/podcast. This is episode 139. Lloyd Thompson, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Gert. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.